Hello, and welcome to Westside Wise Wednesdays, presented to you by Quest Communities and connected to you by AT&T, where we are giving you the news that you can use with the information that you
cannot refuse.
I know that's right. Let's get on into it. My name is Ebony Ford.
And I am Leonard A., your co-host.
And Mr. Adams, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Good. I'm very good. We have another awesome podcast for y'all today. Mr. Adams, let everybody know, who do we have here today?
Who do we have? We have none other than my neighbor, my associates, our associates, my friend, a leader on the West Side, hit the West Side hard when he got here, wasn't taking no for an answer. He's hometown hero. He's none other than John Ahmann with the Westside Future Fund. How you doing, John?
Hey,
I gotta wait for all my fans to stop applauding.
They love you.
Absolutely. How you doing today, John?
Thanks for having me. You know, when you get a good introduction, it's always thinking it's just time to leave before I mess it up. But thank you.
We're going to keep it going because you know that Yes, absolutely. Well, Mr. John Ahmann, tell us, just basically, we'll start really broad here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
I'm an Atlanta native, to kind of, anchor my bio. So, Grady baby.
Hey.
Grew up on Atlanta's east side, Candler Park, Druid Hills area of Atlanta. I came of age when the city of Atlanta was in a very different position than it is today. Because when I came of age, the city stories were more one of depopulation at the time I was coming. And started my career after college, really kind of working in the space of kind of public-private partnerships. My first job out of school was working up in the U.S. Congress. But when I came back to Atlanta, I had worked for the Atlanta Olympic Committee, which really kind of a core lesson was go big and have a deadline. Because I often think if they didn't have a deadline to host the 1996 Olympics, we'd still be meeting about it, planning for it. We wouldn't actually be getting it. But it, big vision with a deadline. And then I worked for the State Economic Development Agency. I worked at Metro Chamber.
Wow.
And right before this job, I ran a group called Atlanta Academy for Progress, which was a lot of the corporate leadership, university leadership, working with the mayor of Atlanta, different initiatives to improve the city. By way of, also during the time I have two daughters, older daughters now, and also served on a local school board, Decatur School Board, for 8 years.
Wow.
But I think, and the other thing I would say, I take a lot of inspiration in the story of Atlanta, so it's part of my why I'm working at the Westside Future Fund. But what Atlanta was as a city and what Atlanta has become as a city, and how Atlanta leaders have affected the trajectory of our country, is something I take a lot of personal inspiration from.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Hey, John, you said a word, if you don't mind, depopulation. You came up in a time and a period that the city was depopulation. I would like to go back to that. I found that to be a strong word, and I think our listeners would like to know what was happening at that time that you would select the word that the city was depopulated.
Yeah, so when I was coming of age, I think a couple things were kind of going on simultaneously. One, because I was young when this occurred, but I still remember it when Maynard Jackson was elected mayor, so in 1972. So you had white business flight, some degree of white business flight happening. You also had, with the bus desegregation, you had white flight around schools happening at that time. And then you also had, with a lot of business locations, more happen in the suburbs. So that, when I was coming of age, the explosive growth of Cobb and Gwinnett especially.
Yes.
Yep. Because the city of Atlanta, the core, was originally the hub, right? But then the region just exploded around the city. And a lot of that, a lot of different factors went into that. So when I was coming of age too, and when I worked at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, a lot of the talk was that the new core of Atlanta wouldn't be downtown Atlanta anymore.
Nope. Tell us more.
The new core of Atlanta would be, 85 and 400, right? That the new
it would be
the new center of business. That Atlanta was seen as kind of a losing city. And I remember the downtown Atlanta, the original urban core especially,
Yes.
depopulated. Then at that time, Midtown. Then you had, but no, I remember that very clearly. That the city was a lot of the business location people attracting wasn't into the city's urban core, and it was seen as a disadvantage. The city was not seen as a desirable
business location or even
for
place
a big
to
business.
live.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, look at that. Fast
Yes.
forward how many? 40 years maybe? And now
man.
look, people are coming back into the city.
No,
Which
I thought no, because it's fascinating me to Leonard, because when I was at the Metro Chamber, because the Metro Chamber was originally the Atlanta Chamber.
Oh, it changed to Metro because of the flight.
Well, because so much business activity had moved to the Metro.
Wow.
And at the time it went, because the suburban counties all had their own chambers, the Cobb Chamber, the Gwinnett Chamber, the Clayton Chamber, the DeKalb Chamber. They all had, there was the Atlanta Chamber, which was the City of Atlanta Chamber.
Only.
And then right before the Olympics, the chamber president at the time put the word Metro Atlanta. Infuriated all the suburban chambers.
I can only imagine because it would be bigger.
Well, no, they're saying you don't represent
You
us.
represent us, right?
Okay.
It can
Yes.
encompass
Yes.
all of them.
They saw that as Atlanta trying to insert itself into their suburban, and they didn't want anything to do with that. And
the tables
and at the time there was an enormous amount of friction, but was so what. And I remember because I was working with the Atlanta Committee for Progress when I think one of Gwinnett's biggest headquartered Fortune 500 companies, NCR. I remember this day. They relocated from Gwinnett to Midtown.
Midtown, yep.
Okay.
When
NCR.
and I remember when that happened. Okay, it's a new day.
Okay.
Wow.
Because then it shifted. Because now all these major companies
Are building up.
are coming not just to the city of Atlanta, but to Atlanta's urban core,
Yeah.
which is inextricably linked with race.
Wow.
You right? If we're going to really have the conversation, Atlanta's urban core is linked to that downtown Atlanta is black.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy.
Race is in almost every facet of the movement, particularly
Right.
around economics. So you had flight, you have urban core, you have the businesses, all of that. If you take it back, it's race. Moving
Still
to the
is.
suburbs was one of those race alternatives. Let's get away from this.
The
Now
city
these suburbs have grown.
They have.
Tremendously.
They have.
And like you said,
People are coming
co-hosts,
back
they're
now,
coming
though.
back, and they're coming back to the West Side.
Yes, they are, because let's think about it. So when the businesses come back, people don't want to sit on 85, 400, 75, 20, I don't care what it is, in traffic for an hour. They're like, well, let me just come on back into the city and live near where I work. And then also there's a lot more, there's not more play that's happening around here as well. Live, work, play, right?
That's
Keep
correct.
it all simple.
That's correct.
And so with that, these people are making all this money and they're coming in. And the cheapest places, to be honest, to live in the city of Atlanta is going to be the West Side, because it's still a very desirable area because of the proximity to Midtown and downtown. And so that kind of segues and brings us to the work that
Yes.
Westside Future Fund is doing. It's all going to connect, right?
Yes. Tell us,
so,
John.
Yes, John. So this is a huge job, Westside Future Fund. And I do have a little bit of a background and connection with Westside Future Fund for those that don't know that.
Yeah?
Yes. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But you guys keep people, broadly speaking, okay, legacy residents in their homes on the west side of Atlanta. Is that correct? And can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, but you wanted to ask about where the Westside Future Fund came from, right?
Well, yeah, let's start with that. Yeah.
Or did I just make that up in my head?
No, I think you are right. Let's keep
because
it
one
moving.
thing when I want to be that I have a lot of humility for is there are numerous organizations, and Leonard founded one of them, that have been working on West Side issues and the issues of the underserved West Side for a long time.
Long time, yes.
Right? And you take how long the AUC schools have been working and championing. And so what I'm very sensitive to, and maybe we didn't do such a good job this is when we launched, is that recognition.
Yes.
There was an existing ecosystem. Because then you get into why did they need the Westside Future Fund?
Correct.
Right? Why did they need why didn't they just empower groups that were already here? Right?
Community quarterback.
There you go. So, and at the time, and it may be an imperfect answer, but was there at the time. It was the Atlanta Committee for Progress at that time had developed a little bit of a model in partnership with the mayor to identify some pressing issue, then try to figure out, a solution. Mm-hmm. And it had a model of any kind of strategy the organization itself wouldn't own, because ACP was just a collaborative organization. It wasn't meant to run anything at the time. So when the Mercedes-Benz Stadium was when the mayor announced with Mr. Blank the location of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which at that point, prior to their announcement, had been in question where it was going to go. Mm-hmm. And previously, actually, what's really interesting, some people might not remember the story, is the original financing for the stadium, the bonds that were necessary to finance the build out of the stadium, were going to be backed by the state via the Georgia Dome.
Got you. Okay.
But then the governor, who supported it at the time, couldn't get the votes in the State House. Couldn't get the votes. They had the funding source, which was a diversion, part of the hotel motel tax, mm-hmm. which had helped build the Georgia Dome. And so then the mayor stepped up and said, okay, we'll guarantee the bonds through Invest Atlanta.
This is Mayor Reed.
Mayor Reed, yeah, mm-hmm. Thanks. And I remember because he called in an internal meeting of folks to kind of think it through, because his election was later that year. Mm-hmm. And he had talked to other mayors, and this is not any kind of, it's a wonderful stadium, but the polling of it wasn't favorable for financing it.
Okay.
So the mayor saw it as a bit of a political risk. Mm-hmm. And was very supportive of the project, but then it got into, well, how do we help the West Side too, as part of this, certainly being the mayor of Atlanta now, kind of leading its financing. Absolutely. And then the Atlanta Committee for Progress, the corporate CEOs at the time said, well, how can we help? And so then that led a task force to the chair of the Housing Authority at the time, Dan Halpern, and another gentleman named Doug Hertz, who's actually a minority in the Atlanta Falcons, to think through. And we kind of had this bias. We need some kind of not-for-profit mm-hmm. to kind of be the vehicle for kind of the interest of the corporate community to help support the West Side, which was kind of the undergirding of the launch of the Westside Future Fund.
I did not know that.
And we took a lot of lessons, and one of those being, Leonard's earlier comment, community quarterback, which is something came out of the purpose-built community, out of the work that Tom Cousin and Shirley Franklin and others led out of Eastlake. So I think I've kind of wandered on the answer to this question, but I think one of the, because a lot of our supporters reflected a lot of the overwhelming support for the Westside Future Fund has come from Atlanta's corporate community, and a lot of that was very intentional. Like, how can we, do more to help on the West Side? Oh, but one thing I'm much more mindful about now, that when we first launched, especially sitting here with Leonard, is we don't need to take oxygen away from other organizations that are out there, and especially those that are indigenous to the West Side.
Yes, that have been there.
Well, thank you, John.
Wow.
And speaking of not taking oxygen, some of your initiatives, would love for you to go over some of your North Stars that you're impacting on the West Side, as well as some of your initiatives. But Home on the West Side is one that, as you speak about not taking oxygen, for the listeners, John and I have had some conversations around, us being and wanting to impact the North Star of affordability on the West Side. Our organizations both concentrating on affordable housing or equitable housing, and we finally said, why don't we, get together and make this Home on the West Side a collective. We haven't confirmed it all yet, but just concept-wise and talking-wise, it just makes sense, that people who are championing affordable housing, we should get behind a boulder and push that together. And I think Home on the West Side is going to be that. We want to get behind it and bring our pipeline in collaboration with Westside Future Fund to really make some impacts on the West Side there. So how about some of your other initiatives you have going on, John, on the West Side, or even your North Stars that you're looking to impact?
Yeah. Some engaged companies and individuals.
Yeah. Any partners, strategic partners? Obviously, you talked about corporate.
Let's talk about corporate partners.
Yeah, how about corporate partners? Let's jump out there. And we're sponsored by
AT&T. We know
we're
connected.
Yeah, I appreciate. AT&T has been a tremendous, supporter of Quest, tremendous supporter of different organizations on the West Side. AT&T has been a tremendous supporter of the Westside Future Fund, and actually one of our board members, Sylvia Russell. I first met her when she was Sylvia Anderson, and she was on the board of the Atlanta Academy for Progress, and she was head of AT&T for Georgia.
Okay.
Wow.
Maybe a drum roll for that.
Yeah,
Yes.
drum roll. What's my drum roll?
Drum roll.
I don't think they have one there.
Yes. Doom.
Applause. Oh yeah.
So what I appreciate about AT&T is not, as well as other corporations, is not just their support, but the intentionality of the justice, kind of the social justice part of this support, and the understanding of that part of the work of Quest, part of the work of Westside Future and other organizations is addressing inequities that were purposely perpetrated.
Yes.
That's right.
On Atlanta's West Side.
Yes.
And the conscious recognition of working to address those inequities in an affirmative way.
Absolutely.
And so certainly, other corporations like AT&T, they're very involved with us. Some of Atlanta's, the Coca-Cola Company,
Yes.
Delta Airlines,
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A,
PNC,
the Home Depot.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Delta.
Goodwill of North Georgia. Good. Yes.
Others. And what I appreciate, and back to some of the history, is these corporations are headquartered here. I mean, Atlanta's got great assets. The airport, is being a primary one. This location in the southeast and other things. But a huge part of it, too, is Atlanta's brand.
Yes.
Right? And Atlanta's, you think back to 1960, in the early 60s, Atlanta's brand at that point had been the capital of the Confederacy.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And you think back in the 60s, we had a segregationist governor named George Maddox.
I am learning some history today.
And he wasn't a quiet segregationist governor.
Right.
He was warring at the time. Then Atlanta had its second to last white mayor, Ivan Allen. But what Atlanta got rebranded is all the work of civil rights leaders, amongst the most notable, the most famous, but a lot of others like Dr. Martin Luther King. But then Ivan Allen, as mayor of Atlanta, supported for his time. We go back today and be like, you could have done more, but for his time, he was very progressive.
Yes. Very.
And testified in some of the Civil Rights Act in the face of his own U.S. senators. Wow. That remade the brand of Atlanta, I think, in a lot of ways. So a lot of Atlanta's winning brand is because of that history, and I appreciate companies like AT&T and others, understand that legacy and our role to help grow that flame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is maybe me personally wanting, just since we're having this conversation, get a little bit of information out to our listeners about Home on the West Side, because it is an awesome, if you guys are okay with that, it is an awesome program. And I'm actually a recipient, so I think, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, Home on the West Side is pretty much like 3 different initiatives in one. So they have a renter's portion to keep, again, legacy residents here on the West Side.
Okay.
It has a buyer's portion where it helps people get into housing, maybe with some down payment assistance. And then it also has the anti-displacement tax fund, right?
Oh, man.
I think I said that right. And so that last one is the one that I am a recipient of, and I do not shy away from telling my business, okay? Especially if it's going to help someone else, okay?
All right.
So Westside Future Fund is actually paying my taxes, the increase in my taxes from 2017. Yeah, you are.
Man.
You didn't
Look
know
into
that, did you?
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't have said nothing. From 2017, which is when I entered the program, so for 20 years, 2017, and for me, 2037. And
that is awesome.
It is awesome. Okay, we really need applause for that one.
Yes.
And if it was not for that, someone in this neighborhood who maybe didn't make a lot of money, a single mother, whatever the case may be, to have someone pay your taxes to allow you to stay in your home and in this neighborhood as this gentrification sweeps over this area is just it's incomparable. I don't know of any other programs out there like that for my neighborhood, so I am very, very grateful, and I want other people to be aware of it as well. So can you tell me the neighborhoods specifically that Home on the West Side serves?
English Avenue.
That's where I live.
Vine City.
Where I live. And you too.
And you too.
Me too. And the AUC neighborhoods, Atlanta University Center neighborhoods.
Okay.
Ashu Heights.
Got you.
Okay.
And Just Us.
And Just Us.
And Just Us.
What is Just Us? I've never really
Oh,
researched
yeah.
that. I have to look that up.
But Just Us is one of Atlanta's oldest neighborhood associations.
Okay.
It's right nestled in there next to Ashview Heights.
Okay.
And it's one of Atlanta's a smaller neighborhood, but it was a very historically strong professional black class, working class neighborhood.
Excellent.
That has a lot of great leaders that have come out of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's stayed a very other parts of the West Side neighborhoods have had some more disinvestment challenges.
Yes.
Just us stayed pretty strong.
Yeah,
But they were when I first started.
Us.
Just us.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything when I first started the work, and we were, doing our land use framework plan and got to know them. They're very intentional about participating. So
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, I did want to, before we go to break, co-host, I wanted to just circle right back to the corporations,
Right.
the attractiveness of Atlanta, the large companies that are here, and comment if you like. But what I also heard or have experienced is that because these corporations are here, we're a little different because actually their executive leader or their chief executive leader actually sits in Atlanta. So we have the decision makers for these larger companies that are right here in Atlanta. So if we need to create a Westside Future Fund to have long-lasting impact in an underserved side of town, it doesn't have to go, all the way to California or Seattle or something like that. So was that a factor that helped bring this Westside Future Fund cohort together because we did have decision makers here?
yes,
Okay.
Unequivocally, and part of what the nature of any organization, the top leader is able to make decisions that often, in the early days can be perceived as, risky. And so it may be hard for someone, at a different level in the corporation to make that type of decision. But, the CEO is, committing to things, obviously. Yeah. So I having been lucky enough to be with the ACP, saw that as their willingness to step up and the risk to them is, when they're going about civic business, it's not necessarily the first thing their shareholders are demanding they do.
Gotcha.
And so if they get into, civic business and there's, bad press or other things, their shareholders might be like, well, why aren't you working on, whatever their core business is? So
Gotcha.
that's what I mean by the risk.
That makes sense. All right. And now it is time to hear a word from our sponsor, AT&T Foundation. We'll be right back. Hi, it's Ebony Ford, host of Westside Wise. Access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet is more important than ever. That's why AT&T is furthering its efforts to help bridge the digital divide by offering new solutions that help households here in Atlanta and beyond stay connected to work, education, healthcare, and more. AT&T has worked to reduce barriers to the cost of home internet service by combining access from AT&T, which provides low-cost internet service for eligible households, with the Federal Affordable Connectivity Program benefit. Eligible households can get free home internet service. I discovered access from AT&T at a time when I had no car, no job, no money, no internet. It was the segue for me to be able to apply for benefits, look for childcare programs, look for jobs, and attend training. It literally was my foundation to be able to get back on my feet. And it all started with access from AT&T. Terms and restrictions apply. Speeds up to 100 megabits per second where available. Learn more at att.com/internet/access.